This is going to be our 30th annual Cody Awards season. So for those of you who are expecting to come to the conference in May in San Francisco and see the Cody Awards actually presented, we'll also have a bit of history because we've had 30 years of presenting this award. 30 years ago, there was one education category, and now we have 29. So nominations for that will open on September 8th. And so as a company, you should go ahead and nominate your product that you think is going to be the best of some category. And then if you know educators and administrators, or if that's who you are and you're on the webinar now, you can go to sia.net/Codys and actually sign up to be a judge or apply to be a judge. And we'll be looking for those with some experience and expertise in a given area to judge those products. The other thing we've been doing now for at least 7 years, and Lindsay is driving the program this year, is our Innovation Incubator program. And we help new startups with new products and or services to get the visibility they need, sometimes to get the funding they need. And it's all about sort of the thought leadership that we do and the connections that we can make. But applications will open on the 18th. And then it'll be reviewed. All the applications will be reviewed starting late to mid-September by our members, and we'll select at some point after a few reviews, select 10 to present at our Education Business Forum in New York in December. And there are some awards and prizes that our members give, and just a lot of connections because it's that support and business connections that are so critical. We do all of this with 3 key people right now on the education team, and you can see my picture, you can see Lindsay's, and Mark Snyderman is not on the call today, but because he's on the Hill in a meeting, but he does all of our education policy work. We are trying to hire a new person who's going to be doing education policy and programs management here. So if you know of somebody who wants a full-time job with great benefits in DC, you should let them know. You can send them to our website and the career section, and you'll see a posting and how to apply. The same thing is true with our internship. We keep an education intern, and it turns out that the one that we have, who's very, very good, is going back to school and is not going to be able to continue in the fall. So we would like that person. So now we have time to introduce 2 key people who are going to be speaking today. They have been working with us on this Vision K-20 survey for some time. Sue, from the very, very beginning, when we had a number of members get together to try and figure out what our vision should be. And it was a lot of meetings and a lot of organization, and Sue was the one that really drove it to completion, helped develop our website, all kinds of things with other members, of course. And then Susan came into the picture a few years later and really helped us with a easier-to-use survey and probably something that is a little bit more stronger in terms of survey results. So I'm going to let Sue Collins start and tell us a little bit about the survey itself.
Terrific. Thank you, Karen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good lunchtime for those of you on the Central Coast. We have been doing this for a while. We actually started in the year 2007 with establishing the vision, and we did it for a couple of reasons. The Education Division had a need to take a stance around what the future of education could look, both for guidance for the members, but also for publicly talking about technology policy and funding and how those related to educational improvement. And as a result, we came up with a vision which is encapsulated here but has many different components, and there is a whole booklet or in a website around what that vision entails. But in the short, it's really to ensure that technology is used in the best way to make sure that students across the country have access to teaching and learning environments that prepare them to compete globally and lead the world in innovation. And of course, when you have something like that, you also have to have some definition around it. In our thinking, it included things like personalized learning, equity, tracking student performance to ensure that we were giving them the right kinds of instructional materials. It was collaborative. We wanted to make sure that teachers and administrators were as effective as they could be, and of course that students really were able to compete in the 21st century, so build their proficiencies so that they could be successful. As you can see from the chart below, this is the sixth year of the survey itself, with one additional year of survey data. So we have been doing this for a long time, but Susan Mel has come in and really added a new dimension to our work, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The vision itself is centered around two different sets of attributes, one being the educational component and the other one being the technology component. So I won't read through these, but you can see that this is around meeting student needs, informing instruction, making sure that kids are learning deeply and not just widely, making sure that collaboration is a key part of it, any place, anytime learning, and to make sure that there was this piece around creativity and self-expression. So those 7 goals are wrapped in a set of technology measures that we use to benchmark progress towards improvement of education and increased appropriate use of technology. And you can see here we have things like 21st century tools, again, anytime, anywhere access, differentiated learning, technology-based assessment tools, which have certainly come into the forefront in the recent past. But when we first started talking about them, were sort of dreams in people's eyes. And then to make sure that the enterprise really worked well in order to support the instructional process. So with that, and we can answer questions, there's a chat window if you have any questions. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Susan Mel, who's the CEO of MMS Education, and she has been a great addition to this. She really masterminds this survey and all the changes that we've made in the recent past, and has great insight into the results and what they mean. So with that, Susan?
Thank you, Karen, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. And I also wanted to just mention that the webinar today, we're just really going to be talking about some of the key highlights and key takeaways. The full report of the survey is available for free on the SIA website, and there's both the executive summary and then the full report, which is about 90 pages, but it has one whole segment on just the K-12 market and one whole segment on just the post-secondary. So I encourage you after this webinar, again, we'll be talking about the key takeaways and key highlights, but to get the full report and the full data, please download it from the SIA website. And thanks, Karen and Lindsay and Sue. We've really enjoyed working with SIA on this survey for the past 4 years. And just to tell you a little bit more about it, the survey itself is really a self-assessment tool. It was intended for educators to take it and then to be able to track their results year over year. When they take the survey, they answer it, and they say at the beginning that they're answering it on either on behalf of their classroom, their school or building level, or their district or campus level, so that they intentionally are answering the questions from that perspective, and that's reported. The survey itself consists of 37 benchmark statements, which then they answer. And as we said, the intent is to be able to give the educators sort of a report that they can look at year over year. This is an example of, there's 4 benchmarks here, there's 37 altogether. They're on a scale of 1 to 7, and we've asked people to list first to evaluate where their current level of integration is and where their ideal level is. And you'll see on this benchmark at the top it says current status of your school and then ideal status of your school. Depending on how the participant answers the question at the very beginning, this would either say school, building, or district, or classroom, school, or district, so that it's clear throughout the survey how they're answering it. So then it's a self-assessment. They determine where they are today and where they would like to be ideally. And just to give you a little history of the survey, in MMS Education, we first started working with SIA in, I think, 2011, and then going into 2012. One of the things that we added was this ideal level, and that was to help educators say, because we realized that not everybody wants to integrate all technology into every aspect of their education at 100% across the board. So what their ideal level is, we wanted them to be able to say, here's where we are today, this is our current level, and this is where we want to be, what we think would be ideal for this particular benchmark. So that was one of the first things that we added, which again helped us see whether the current levels are changing and whether ideal levels are changing. In 2013, we added some new questions about bring your own device, since that was such an important trend and concern among so many people. And then we also modified the benchmarks. We went to a 7-point scale to get a little more granular in our data. So we field tested that, and then this year rolled out in the beta test held up, and so we rolled out to the whole thing nationally this year. We added some additional questions this year about BYOD and also about preparation for summative online high-stakes assessments. The other thing we added this year was we were able to introduce testing for statistical significance at the 95% confidence level. So throughout the report, there are results that are directional, showing changes at a directional level, and then we've also highlighted those things that tested to be statistically significant at the 95% confidence level. New in 2014, as we talked about, one thing, you need to sign in online. So if you want to get into the web, you need to go to ReadyTalk and to sign in that way, and then you can call in for the audio. Lindsay, is there anything else that you wanted to mention to people? Or that's okay. In terms of other things that were new in 2014, we asked about the use of mobile devices for those that were allowing students to bring mobile devices in. How are they used? Why are they being used? And which ones? Which devices are they using? And then also this preparation for online summative assessment. We wanted to know, do they have the broadband adequate broadband that they need to do the high-stakes testing, and how prepared are they in terms of devices and hardware? We weren't getting into, are they prepared from the teaching perspective or the learning perspective? We were just talking about from a technology, hardware, and software perspective. So some of the results. First of all, we had about 1,000 respondents this year, and where we experienced more fall-off this year was in post-secondary, and that's just sort of a function of the fielding, and the way that the survey is promoted is through SIA's partners who reach out to all of their customers in the education market and then ask them to complete the survey. And the survey was fielded from January through May of this year. And so we had a little more fall off in the post-secondary market, but still about 1,000 participants overall. The distribution of participants was very comparable to previous years, in that in the K-12 market, it's about a third between secondary, elementary, and the district level. And post-secondary falls out about 63% to 4-year, and then the balance in 2-year. And this has been pretty consistent over the years. In terms of who participates in the survey, again, very consistent year over year, with slightly less than half of the K-12 market are at the teacher level, and same thing in post-secondary, the professor-instructor level. And then it's split between IT, librarian media specialist, department chairs, principals. So again, it's interesting that the split of who's taking the survey has remained very consistent. The first question about the BYOD policies at post-secondary, not surprisingly. And the question here is, do you allow students to bring their mobile devices into the classroom? No surprise, I don't think. More than 90% or more are yes at the post-secondary level. And then when we got into K-12, you'll see that it is, in the dark orange here, is when they said yes, they are currently allowing students to bring mobile devices into the classroom. So it's secondary and K-12, that's about 50%, up slightly from the year before, in 2014. And elementary, it's about flat with last year, roughly around 19-20%. But then when you look at the lighter orange color is in 1 year, how many will be allowing it. So if you take now and in 1 year, how many will be allowing, and then in 5 years. And you can see that in 5 years, almost 85% of secondary and K-12 districts will be allowing students to bring mobile devices, and about 66% in elementary. So you can see that intentional growth in those areas will continue, as it has in the past few years. There's a lot of information on this slide, so I'll try to share with you how to look at this. But the question was, so of those who are allowing students to bring mobile devices into the classroom, which devices are they bringing? And it's laptops, tablets, e-readers, smartphones, cell phones, and then internet-capable gaming devices. And again, the blue, dark blue, is not allowed, and the dark orange is allowed. And the lighter orangey color, paler orange, is allowed with restrictions. And so looking at this, what it says, and then the two columns, it's current versus future. So what are they allowing now, and what will they allow in the future? And you can see the blue box over to the right where it says of those that allow devices, currently accepted with restrictions for laptops and tablets, secondary and K-12, it's, between 76 and 80%, 79 and 78% for tablets. And then e-readers even higher in secondary and K-12. Elementary is a little bit lower, which isn't too surprising. Smartphones and cell phones are least acceptable now, but will continue to grow. And then internet gaming capable devices are the least accepted across the board. So again, and one thing that you can see on this slide is for both laptops and tablets, you can see significant growth over the next few years from today and what's going to be in the future, and for e-readers as well. So of those devices that are being used, they're being used today, and there's an intentional and planned growth for the future. Then we wanted to know, and this came out of actually last year when we when we presented our results, we were asked the questions, well, if they're allowing mobile devices, how are they using them? What are they doing with them? So we asked that question this year. And that's why we like to get feedback and want to know what are the things that you want to know, as you see these results, what are some of the questions that come to your mind? So we asked, how are you using these devices? And this is a frequency question, which was, of all the different ways you can use them, what are they used for the most often? So across the board, again, the dark orange implies that with the top two box, which is they're used the most frequently, it's primarily to access research and digital content online, followed by to create content and to develop skills. Developing skills was even a little higher among elementary, which isn't unusual. And then the others are to communicate and collaborate and to access e-textbooks and instructional materials. So this was the way that they're using devices. Of those who are allowing them, how are they using them? Next, we asked about the preparation for online assessments. And again, we were looking at two things. Do they have adequate bandwidth? And do they have adequate devices to use it? And interestingly enough, only 40% feel highly prepared in terms of their adequate bandwidth, that almost 60% express concerns, with less than a quarter really feeling, and less than a quarter saying they're not prepared at all from the bandwidth perspective. And then the second bar across the board here is their ability to have enough devices and hardware to manage the online summative assessments. And again, they're even less confident that they're prepared in that area. So clearly the schools with 40% or fewer feel highly prepared for online summative assessments, which has a huge impact, as you know, with Common Core requirements and the online assessment requirement coming down the pike. This is of concern in terms of where we're headed. When we look at this, just in general, at the beginning of the survey, we ask an overarching question about their perception of their current level of integration compared to their ideal, and then also their importance. How important is technology integration in their school, district, or campus, or building? And what we found was that it is up slightly at both K-12 and post-secondary. It's up directionally in terms of their current level. But what was interesting, when asked the overarching question, it was slightly down a little bit in terms of importance and also ideal. And whether there are other priorities, such as Common Core, or other things pressing on them, so that the importance of this fell off slightly this year. We don't know the exact cause for this change, but it's been slightly different. But what's interesting is that overarching question is in a little bit of disagreement with the individual benchmarks, because across the board, all the benchmarks increased in terms of their current level of integration, and all the ideal benchmarks increased as well. So there's a disconnect, which often happens in research, where one question may not bear out the other. As we have found in all previous years, post-secondary participants are always ahead and way ahead of K-12 in terms of both their current and their ideal level of integration. And when we analyze the data and we slice and dice it and look at it from many different perspectives, the biggest differentiator across the board is always the difference between post-secondary and K-12. I don't think that's any big surprise, because post-secondary has always been slightly ahead. Students have been using technology longer by the time they get there. It's more integrated, and so they've always been ahead of K-12. This chart shows this again. This was the overarching question for K-12 in terms of their current level of integration compared to 2014 compared to 2013, and that's that top two bars. And it's up a little bit from 20 to 22%. The importance level dropped, and that shows to be statistically significant, and then it dropped from 81 to 76. And the ideal level is down a little bit as well. So there's some change here, but as we said, this is also in contradiction to what we found when we started to look at the individual benchmarks. This just shows you a basic kind of overview of the landscape, which shows that K-12 is below post-secondary in terms of their current level. Both K-12 ideal level has dropped a little bit, as has post-secondary's ideal level, and the importance level has dropped a little bit based on their overall first general question of looking at their institution on a whole. When we look at the individual benchmarks, the overall, as we mentioned before, the overall average current and average ideal benchmarks have increased directionally for both K-12 and post-secondary year over year. So that's showing some positive, that schools are making progress. It's slow, but they are making progress. They're moving forward towards achieving their goals. Some of the highlights of the benchmark scores, we're not going to try to go through all 37 for both K-12 and post-secondary, because we'd be here all afternoon, but we're going to just give you some of the highlights. That first of all, and this has been consistent, I know, for the last 4 to 5 years, is that security tools are the two that always rise to the top for both K-12 and post-secondary. Security tools to protect student data and security tools to protect students' online privacy. So when they're investing in technology and looking at what they put as a top priority, they're putting their students' privacy and security first. And those are the things that rise to the top and have consistently. And it's also the area where the current level of technology is the closest to the ideal, where the gap is the smallest between the two. So they're getting closest to achieving their ideal level at this for these two important areas.
Susan, I just wanted to check in. There's a question about our use of the term integration, and I don't think that we're talking about integration on of a like technical standards, LTI, LRI, whatever. We're talking about putting just their use of computers and software and resources into their curriculum.
Great, thank you, Karen, for that's it's a good question, and it's one of the things about the use of terminology, right? But here we are.
Yeah, and then since I've interrupted, I'll ask the second one, which is that they're wondering if we can provide any comparative analysis of the results of this versus sort of other countries. And one of the things that we plan to do from SIA standpoint is to get more involvement of responders from other countries, because we would love to be able to have educators and administrators in other countries, more of them, respond to the survey. We had a few this year, but not enough to do a statistical comparison, and we'd love to know that. We'd also love to be able to highlight how states are doing with each other, but again, that takes more responders, and that means we need our partners to help us get those responders in our next season.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because when you start to, the international would be great, and as you mentioned already, Karen, we've had some participants from international, but not enough to make it significant. And then also, the more we can get more responses from individual states, the deeper analysis we can provide.
Yeah, and the easiest ones would, of course, to be into Canada, where I think the person who asked the question is from, but Australia, New Zealand. I mean, we have good connections over in other quote English-speaking countries. We did 2 years ago, because we were starting to get a few global responses. We did actually go through and do what I have termed it globalizing it, in terms of some of the either spelling or the use of the terminology. For example, instead of using the grade levels in one of the questions, we used ages of students, because that is more globally comparative data.
Great, thanks. So highlights of the benchmarks. First of all, as we said, almost every benchmark showed directional improvement over last year, both K-12 and post-secondary had a little more fall off on a benchmark by benchmark statement, but K-12 was across the board, they increased it. The ones that showed statistically significant increases for K-12, that students had more access to digital educational content online, which I think is a very positive indicator that we may be starting to reach the tipping point where more and more students are getting their information online. That institutional leaders are using technology tools for decision making, and you'll see when we look at the top 10, a lot of the technology that's being used at the higher level is around the systems that the schools and the districts use for the management of their institutions. But there's also more access to digital content through multiple platforms. For those of you who are creating products, it is important then that your product can be viewed and used on different platforms, because that's increasing, and that they're seeing an increase in online tutoring available to all students. So those are the ones in K-12. Post-secondary, it's again that the management supported by digital enterprise systems, the multimedia instructional is interactive. I'm not going to read through them all, but these are the ones where they saw significant increases. There was only one benchmark that showed a statistically significant decline, and that was in post-secondary, where there's always access to adequate bandwidth. And I think this is one of the problems where we're seeing the demand for bandwidth is increasing. So therefore, the amount of the bandwidth you have to have available continues to go up and up. And so this was a benchmark at post-secondary that showed a decline. This shows you the top 10 benchmarks that are the highest current scores for K-12, and they're also the ones that are closest to ideal. So the blue bar represents 2014, the green bar 2013, and you can see they're either slightly ahead, a few are right on target with last year, or more statistically or more significantly ahead. And again, they have to do the top two we said with security. Then many of them are about information systems being used for budgeting. But then a lot of them, it's about students having access to content online, and online access through wireless Wi-Fi is reliable. The bottom one, you see there's a jump there as well. So this just shows you the top 10 benchmarks with the highest current level of integration. Again, this is on a scale of 1 to 7. This is the average score. When we looked at post-secondary, we saw a little more variance this year between comparing this year to previous years. Again, security tools are at the top, but you do see this increase in students having access to digital content online and the use of more online courses, online access, number of different things here at the very bottom. Again, the digital content can be accessed through multiple platforms, jumped up. So just some of the highlights. The other thing that we look at is what happens to the ideal benchmarks. And the ideal is sort of their vision of where they want to go, how far do they want to go. The two that rose to the top in terms of priority, where we saw the online access through wireless Wi-Fi is still one of the top ones, even though it was flat with last year. It's still up at 6.76 against a 7-point scale, is right way up there. And that they've pushed this access to adequate bandwidth. One of the things that we heard repeatedly throughout the survey in different ways is the need and the demand for more bandwidth. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. You know, we're hearing it everywhere, but that was repeatedly came up through the survey. The other ideal levels that increased again, adequate bandwidth provided for students to access digital content, and then the need for educators to have access to the level of technology training common to other professionals. And when we shared this information at ISTE, and one person commented, they said, do educators think that, you know, those of us who are you know, in the working world, that we get lots and lots and lots of technology training provided? So it could be that there's a misperception there about how much training we get. But it's just interesting that that's something that they want, and they see their ideal level continuing to increase. The other ideal level, and this, there's a reversal here. It should be that the assessments measure students' technology skills and competency. That should reach 6.07 from 5.06. It was just reversed. But that's an area that has increased, where their ideal level has gone up, that they want assessments to be able to be used in that way. Then we also look at the gap. Like, you know, when we look at where their current level is and what's their ideal level, where's the gap? The largest gap right now between the two is, again, this issue about educators having access to enough training to use technology, and we've heard that over and over. They need more training. That learning management systems are used to differentiate instruction. Again, the biggest gap between the way they're currently being used and the way they could be, or ideally. And then the personal e-portfolios travel with students. And again, that's always been low on the bar in terms of their current level of integration. Just some comments from survey participants, and you hear everything, you know, from my districts really trying, they're really working to improve and to integrate technology to help teachers use it more on a day-to-day basis, to, you know, we're moving in the right direction, but we're not getting there yet, to others who are very frustrated because they don't have enough bandwidth, they don't have enough access, and they know that they need to do more. Some of the notable highlights, again, just quick top-level takeaways. The BYOD is definitely moving with almost 50% of your secondary and K-12 districts implementing it now, and a very high percentage implementing it going forward and over the next 5 years. The use of, you know, tablets, laptops, e-readers is going to continue to increase. Schools are not prepared yet for the high-stakes online assessments from a hardware, software, and bandwidth perspective. The the schools continue to both make progress. Their current levels are going up on the benchmarks. Their ideal levels are also going up. So they are making progress, even though it may be slower than some would like. We already mentioned this, but they're continuing to have problems meeting the adequate bandwidth, and that's a bar that just keeps getting raised higher and higher. And we hear this with the E-rate and the need to provide more access to our schools and better bandwidth. The areas where we're closest on closing the gap between current and ideal have to do with student security, the use of technology for institutional planning, management, and systems to track student data, and that that we may be getting better about getting more students access. We're not there yet. Some ideas and just takeaways from this is that when we think about the areas where we're closest to ideal, that has to do with the systems and enterprise management. Those generally tend to be purchases that the school district's making at a high level, probably fewer people involved. You don't have to have as many people buying into the concept. But then when you get into those areas that are the farthest away from ideal, the e-portfolios, online professional learning, some of those areas are more complex decision-making processes. They often involve perhaps larger investments, and also they could be purchased and implemented at the district level, but you have to get a lot of school buy-in for them as well. And that what we see, and what we have seen year over year, is that both K-12 and post-secondary have a real vision, a real desire to integrate technology at a much higher level. They're getting there. They're making progress. Maybe not as quickly as we would all like, and they do need support and help to make that happen. Some of the things in looking at this and looking at the market is that the sort of obstacles or the challenges to really reaching that high level of integration, funding, no surprise, we all deal with that every day. And it's funding not just for the technology, but it's for the staff, the training, the support, the maintenance, all of that needs funding in an ongoing and reliable way. The leadership, many times in some of the open-ended comments, you saw things like, we were making great progress, and then we had a change in leadership, and now we seem to have gone backwards, or we're not making the same progress we were. So if the leadership changes, and there isn't as much a priority put on technology, that can make a difference. Time, it just takes a lot of time to implement technology, use it, and continue to advance as you go forward. The technology obsolescence, that's a concern for many as they make those investments in technology. And accessibility, and we know this already, the issue about accessibility both for students in really rural areas as well as those who are disabled or have really special needs. So with that, those are the top takeaways. As I said, there's a lot of other information and much more detail in the report, and encourage you to please access that. And then we'll open it up for questions and Q&A.
Yeah, Lindsay, I didn't notice if any of our partners were on the webinar today. Did you notice that? They had signed in? Because a few had registered, so I wanted to note those because they are very, very critical to having a successful survey. And while she's sort of searching that, there were a couple, because the presenters can actually see the list of folks who signed on, and particularly we know who has registered. But I was particularly pleased to see a couple of very new members. One is in Televal, Michelle is on, and some folks that are actually in other member companies, but from other divisions, and from like our SIPA division, et cetera. And so we're really pleased that the participants are sort of diverse, which is actually what this division is known for. We have a great diverse membership. So I don't know if Lindsay, you also want to just talk about how people can help us next, say, when it's going to open next for the next survey, and how they can help us get the word out so they can sign up to be a partner.
Sure. So we'd like to launch our Vision K-20 survey in January, kick off the new year with a new survey. And we generally start recruiting at our Ed Business Forum event for new partners and people who can help us get the word out. So if you're going to that, and then we sort of keep following up throughout December and early January to line up partners and stuff so that we can reach as many educators as possible, because the more educators, the more we learn.
Yeah, and it can be another association, it can be a company, it can be anyone who has a really good reach into schools and campuses at the higher ed level. And it doesn't need to be all national or global. If somebody has a really good reach in Texas or somebody has a really good reach in another country, we would love to do that as well. So let's see. I didn't, Lindsay, did you see any other questions? I know we'd love to take more questions. We will certainly be hosting a 2015 survey. I'm sorry, 2005 is like 10 years ago. But 2015, we'll see another survey, and each year we try to ask sort of a special question at the front because it's a little bit more timely than some of the others. What's nice about the main survey is that we can really see trends and shifts and growth, even though it might be slow, in year to year. But then sometimes people just want to know what's going on right now. So that's the reason we asked the BYOD question last year and then expanded upon it this year and then talked about online assessments. So anything else? Otherwise, maybe, Lindsay, we're ready. Oh, Matthew has a question about the likely transition away from print textbooks in secondary education towards online learning systems, customized learning, etc. I'll start by suggesting that one of our surveys, which is called the PK-12 Market Survey, where we get information about actual sales revenues from companies, from ed tech companies surveying, say, the K-12 market and especially the secondary market there. And what we have seen there year to year recently is a tremendous growth in the digital purchases. So since schools have pretty much limited budgets that don't grow much year to year, and certainly not at the percentages that the online and digital learning materials grow, we can only sort of deduce, if you will, that they're purchasing digital instead of print-based. Now, it's not going to be all digital for quite some time. In fact, when we've asked the question about the transition from print to digital, it's been relatively slow, and it's going to be different at different levels. As you noted, secondary is probably going to go faster than elementary, and in fact, post-secondary started that transition probably a year or two earlier. But does either Susan or Lindsay and or Sue have any comments about that transition?
This is Susan. I'll be glad to jump in here. I mean, I think you are seeing a transition from, print only to print and digital combined. I think one of the things is that it's rare, or I think it's somewhat rare. I mean, almost even all of your print textbook companies are now offering some sort of digital component or access or supplemental, or they're combining their print and digital together. Some are offering print only, some are offering print and digital, some are offering digital only. So it's still a mix, and it probably will be a mix for a while. There's certainly supplementals that are being used that are only online. So I think you're seeing the transition, and whether it will ever go, I think that blended learning where it will be a combination of everything. It's going to be print, online, it's going to be teachers, it's going to be students accessing materials from home, it's going to be all different ways of reaching them. So that's sort of my observations of what I think is happening.
Sue, any thought? You have worked with iNACOL in the past and really have looked at, in fact, you've written some materials for us on online learning a while back. Any comments there?
No, I think Susan's on the right track here. I think this is another one of those transitions that is happening. I think that it's interesting that some of the latest data I've seen shows that we're still somewhere between 3 and 4 computing devices per student across the country. And so even though we hear a lot about early adopters and the one-to-ones and the bring your own devices, I think there are a lot of schools who are still working their way up that ladder to have more access for technology, which has a direct impact on how many and how much and how they use digital resources.
Okay. There was a question, actually, Peyton, I'm going to get back to you about a school in Arizona, but it's Vail, Arizona, and I'm trying to remember his name, Matt, someone is there, and they sort of did a textbook-free adoption some years ago and really transitioned to simply online learning. Meanwhile, Ed has questions about broadband being an impediment towards one-to-one or lack of broadband. Yes, that is probably what you meant to say. Susan or Sue, do you want to address that briefly?
I think it's part of what we heard throughout the survey, which is the concerns about having adequate broadband. And I know just anecdotally, you have encountered, schools all across the country who simply don't have the kind of access that we're used to every day, and that's just not the way they don't have the access, whether they're very rural or in certain areas of the country where they just simply don't have that kind of access. And so it's, yes, I would say it has been an impediment, and it's what we heard as a concern. While we were asking it specifically about the online high-stakes assessment, we saw it reflected in the benchmarks as well, that it's an area that both the current levels increased, but the ideal levels increased too of what they want. Sue, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think we just need to follow what the FCC is doing now in potentially providing some additional funding to see how much of an impact that has. So that's obviously still a work in progress, and I don't think we really know what that's going to do or how much that's going to help. But I think it certainly has been an impediment, and it is something that I'm hopeful that the FCC will continue to do something to address.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is that it wouldn't have gotten as far in amongst the committees and in Congress, and the support of every association on earth, it seems, to do this, to support that broadband effort, if they didn't have the statistics that show it was desperately needed.
Right.
Right. That's a great point, Karen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Boy, Matt is asking a lot of good questions. Are instructors able to keep up with technological advances? Is there a gap between the technological advances in education and their ability to keep up with the limited budgets to invest in technologies? How can schools make sure that they're making decisions that will help their students? I think, Susan, the data that we've been collecting with your help sort of shows that gap, and the gap may be slightly decreasing each year, but one of the things that I've noticed, and this is just a personal viewpoint, but as I talked to some of the original responders those first few years when we did pilots, one of the issues that we had was so where are you in the transition of X to X? And the more information they sort of understood about what technology was available and how to use it, the more sophisticated they became about how it could be used, and sometimes the more further they felt behind. That even though they'd made some progress, that end point of what they could do keeps going out. So what happens is that with the limited budgets, they're doing what they can, but that as technology changes, which is something new that a lot of folks in schools are dealing with. 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, they bought books and chalks and chalkboards, et cetera, and those technologies didn't change. New content, new delivery mechanisms perhaps, but now that there's all this sort of onslaught of new hardware every few months, I think it's extremely difficult. But I'm going to stop and let Sue or Susan just comment.
I agree with you, Karen. I would only add, though, I don't think it's only limited to educators. I mean, I know even in business and everything else, trying to keep up with technology because it's advancing so quickly on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is a challenge for everybody. I agree, it's probably an even greater challenge for teachers and the educators, and it is different from the world that they used to know years and years ago. And so it is a struggle, but because they have so many things on their plate. They have a lot that they have to deal with every day. And so just to keep up with, Common Core and all the things that they're being asked to do, and then to also keep up with technology is a challenge.
Great. All right. So Ed has one final question, which is sort of it's a key question that people have been asking since technology started being used in schools, and that had to do with trying to see if there was a direct correlation between student results and greater EdTech adoption usage. And what I'm going to do is, for all of you, is point you to, in fact, Lindsay, if you could do this, to everyone, give them the Vision K-20 website, and then, as a reminder, because that's where they can download the full results again, plus also there's a set of pages in the headers called evidence, and that evidence, we've been collecting what we can, and we put up new things often, but whenever we find some good research results that sort of typifies the use of technology, either meeting some of the goals or benchmarks that we have, or just showing good results, it has to sort of pass the is this good research test, then we post that information on the website there. So on that, if you check out evidence on that, that would be great. And I think we need to close there. Lindsay, any final words or thoughts from the speakers?
Just wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined in on this webinar to learn more about our Vision K-20 project. We hope you downloaded the report and enjoyed learning what we had to share.
Yep. And we are not hosting webinars in August because we're sort of taking a vacation month, but we'll start up again in September. I know that the Global Committee has set a number of global webinars that they're planning to do, and a lot of the other folks are planning them as well in our committees and working groups. So if you continue to watch our website under events and see what we've got, and we'll be happy to host you again. Thank you.
Thank you.